hacer es voy a presentar o dar la bienvenida y agradecimientos en inglés y también voy a hablar un poco en inglés y después paso la palabra a Lourdes y después ella le pasa la palabra a Leonardo Padura y el resto del evento va a ser en español. What we're going to do is I'm going to begin by giving the thanks and the welcome in English. I will also give a little bit of background about who we are lucky enough to have with us today. A little bit about the biography and the work of our guest, Leonardo Padura Fuentes. I will do all of that in English, and then I will pass the mic and the agenda to Lourdes He, professor here in the Black and Hispanic Studies Department and the Department of Modern Languages. She will also, she will switch to Spanish exclusively, and the rest of the event will be in Spanish, along with a reading and then a question and answer interaction with the public. Lourdes tells me that she has prepared the students to ask difficult, provocative, pregnant questions, so I hope that you guys all came to interact and not just to listen. As I said before, we have ordered lunch, so what we will do is when the lunch arrives, ignore it. We will have time after the event to talk among ourselves and have lunch in a social way. Okay, so don't get up and run for the food. Wait until I give you the high sign. Voy a empezar tentando de avergonzarle a Leonardo porque yo he traído la mitad de mi biblioteca aquí y estos todos son libros de o sobre Leonardo. Mis estudiantes llegan siempre y me dicen, profesor, tienes muchos libros, ¿has leído todos los libros? Y yo siempre digo, bueno, solo los de Leonardo. So I brought with me half of my library here, and the library are books by or about, or in which Leonardo has written a chapter, a short story. These are all here to give you an idea of the expanse of the work that we will be focusing on today. Today we are celebrating the third Paul Andre Fite Memorial Lecture. Leonardo Padura is the third in a series of Latin American, Latino, Caribbean writers who have come and given this important lecture. Our first was Alberto Sandoval Sanchez, Puerto Rican writer. The second was Marjorie Agustin, a Chilean writer. And of course today we have with us Leonardo Padura Fuentes. The Paul Andre Fite Memorial Lecture Series brings scholars and writers and is intended to honor the memory of Paul Andre. And we are very grateful to Hedy Fite, who has given us the funds, the endowment to have this ongoing series. I'd also like to thank the Department of Modern Languages, Elena Martinez, who is here, the chair, the Department of Black and Hispanic Studies, the Bildner Center for Western Hemisphere Study, also Stephen Wilkinson, who is a good friend of Leonardo and also a scholar of his work, who spoke earlier this week at Baruch in a number of classes about his work. I want to thank him. And the journalist Wilfredo Cancio Isla, Miami-based journalist, who was the first person ever to tell me about Leonardo. He actually said, if you go to Havana, here's his number, call him. He knows what he's talking about. So thank you to Wilfredo. So, ¿quién es Leonardo Padura Fuentes? Who is Leonardo Padura Fuentes? Padura was born in 1955 in Cuba, and he is among the foremost contemporary novelists and one of the sharpest-eyed cultural critics writing and living in Cuba today. His prolific output in a wide array of genres includes literary criticism, music reviews, investigative journalism. He has a book about La Pelota, baseball in Cuba, screenplays, short stories, historical novels, and most famously, a series of wildly popular detective or crime novels starring Mario Conde. The series of detective novels is sometimes referred to as Las Cuatro Estaciones because the first 4 books in the series take place in the spans of 1 year, 1 calendar year, although they weren't written in 1 calendar year. In 1989, a very important year in Cuba. Sometimes they're referred to as the Havana Quartet. And as I said before, they all feature the same intrepid and all too human protagonist, Mario Conde. These original 4 novels, both in Spanish and in English, are available if you guys are interested in getting hooked on a new crime novel series that will also teach you a lot about Cuban reality and Cuban history and Cuban culture. They are Pasado Perfecto, Vientos de Cuaresma, Paisaje de Otoño, and Máscaras. The English translator did us a really easy job, really good job, and made the titles easy to remember. So they are Havana Gold, Havana Red, Havana Black, and Havana Blue. There's also a novel whose title is untranslatable, Adios Hemingway, which is available both in Spanish and in English, also featuring Conde, and La Neblina de Ayer, which I think was translated as Havana Fever into English. Padura tells me that he has finished his research and he is ready to start writing. He is anxious to get back to Havana to start writing, spend the summer writing the next in the series of crime novels that will feature Conde. And this new novel promises to mix the very interesting, unique, and storied history of Havana's Polish Jews, now Miami's Cubans, and with the city, the story of the city's many urban tribes of today. In various interviews that I've read and some of the books that I have before me, Leonardo has described that in writing these novels, especially the crime novels, he had 2 fundamental purposes. First, that he wanted to write literature, that is, something that is in a dialogue with the society in which he lives, but at the same time something that attempted to be universal. He also, secondly, wanted his novels to be different from the often simplistic and sometimes opportunistic crime novels that had been written in Cuba up to that moment. In some of these interviews, Padura has explained that Mario Conde, the protagonist, believes in very few things because life has shown him that there is very little worth believing in. In other words, Mario Conde is a skeptic. However, he refuses to be a cynic. Finally, in the novels, Conde finds himself invaded by a sense of deception, sadness, nostalgia, and defeat. Yet, the novels also celebrate the values of personal loyalty, friendship, honor, and integrity, leaving the reader with a hard-earned hope, despite, or perhaps because the novels have also dealt honestly with deception and defeat. And I promise if you do read Adios Hemingway, you will see the Cuban and also Leonardo's obsession or fascination bordering on obsession with the work of Ernest Hemingway, a man who is famous for many things, but also for the quote, "Man is not made for defeat. A man can be destroyed, but not defeated." Today we are not going to hear from Leonardo's crime novels. We're going to hear something different. His most ambitious works to date what many people consider two of the best novels written in Cuba in the last 50 years are a pair of historical novels. The first, La novela de mi vida, the novel of my life, is the fictionalized account of the life of 19th century Cuban poet Jose Maria Heredia, interspersed with the current reality of Cuba as a diasporic nation, where many people, including two of my former students and friends, live outside the country but are still Cuban. The other book, the book that we will hear from today, is called El hombre que amaba a los perros. And it not only crosses the Florida Straits, but it crosses the Atlantic Ocean, taking us to Siberia, Turkey, Barcelona, Moscow, Coyoacan, Mexico City, and then back to Havana. This novel is an extraordinary fictionalized exploration of the internal struggles of the socialist project during the course of the 20th century, which culminates in a vivid account of one of the most grisly and notorious political assassinations of the 20th century. This is the assassination of Leon Trotsky by Ramon Mercader. Ramon Mercader, in reality, in fact, and in the fiction of Leonardo Padura, lived the last years of his life in Havana, and he also loved dogs. And that leads us into the fictional invention part of the novel that relates this story to Cuban history and Cuban reality today. The novel was among 5 finalists for Book of the Year in Spain in 2010 and has been described as a fascinating historical explanation of how socialism, the great utopian experiment of the 20th century, became corrupted. Now what I'd like to do is introduce Lourdes Gil, y desde ahora vamos a estar hablando en español. Lourdes, here at Baruch, is a noted poet and essayist. She came to Baruch 11 years ago, in the year 2000, to teach in the Department of Modern Languages and Black and Hispanic Studies, which she continues to do. In fact, Lourdes, probably more than anyone else in either department, teaches a multiplicity of courses on Latin American history, politics, culture, women's studies, and literature, both in translation and in the original Spanish. This semester she is teaching a course, a literature course, which includes the book El hombre que amaba a los perros. Raise your hand if you are in one of Professor Gil's classes. Okay, now we know who you are, so we know who is going to be, I'm going to point to ask the questions. Muy bien, gracias. Okay. Lourdes has a BA from Fordham University. She attended the Universidad Complutense de Madrid for graduate work and also holds an MA from New York University. She has a number of collections of her own poetry that have been published, including El Cerco de las Transfiguraciones. She also has many essays that she's written on art and literature, and also focusing on the art and literature of the Cuban diaspora. These have been included in books, journals, and encyclopedias, among them Inventing America, Bridges to Cuba, and also Remembering Cuba, Legacy of Diaspora, which was edited by Andrea O'Reilly Herrera, who is actually here with us today. So, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for your interest and attention. And now I will hand over the floor to Lourdes.